So Columbina, Zibai, Ineffa, or Neuvillette. In this video I'll be going through all of these characters, listen to their pros and cons, when should you get them, and finally I'll help you choose between each one of them for your specific case. Before continuing that though, if you're trying to get any of these characters, I would recommend getting your Genesis crystals from ldshop.gg. It's a cheap, fast, and secure game top-up website where you can get different games currencies including Genshin impacts up to 30% cheaper. Check it out in the link in the description or the pinned comment. Alright, so back to the video. As I said, I'm going to go through each of these characters, starting off with Columbina, which is kind of the main star of this patch. Columbina is sort of like the Archon equivalent of the Not Cry region, and her role is mainly just going to be a lunar charge support and enabler, a hydro sub DPS slash off-field applier, and just like a support and enabler in general. For her pros, the first pro about her is that she's going to be a huge lunar reactions team-wide buffer. She's going to be buffing the damage of all of the lunar reactions just from her elemental burst. She's going to be giving considerable amounts of damage bonus to all lunar reactions in your team. So for teams that do a lot of lunar reactions, that's definitely going to be super appreciated. She's also going to be a universal support. Obviously, she's not the best universal support outside of like Not Cry teams, but she still can be used as that because she still applies hydro. She still deals a decent amount of off-field hydro damage. She has a full uptime on her elemental skills, so she's very comfortable and easy to play, and that always makes these characters like sort of a universal support. She's gonna be pretty good and appreciated. The third pro about her is synergy with even older units. Her ability to even enable lunar reactions can make her a very good and reliable unit even for older characters. For example, like Neuvillette, Naida, for example, all of these characters can make teams with Columbina right now, and they can make pretty decent upgrades for these characters. You can make lunar teams with any character basically, which is pretty good because she can always convert, normal reaction based teams into lunar reactions, and she can be pretty valuable in some teams, and that's obviously a good thing. That's mainly it for her pros. I mean, they're pretty huge pros for her role as like a support for a specific region. She's definitely super good. She can buff the lunar reactions, applies hydro, which is the main element that those characters need. So she can be the hydro applier and also the buffer for those reactions at the same time, which is something we lacked for a long time for Not Cry teams. That's going to take them to another level for sure. Now, moving on to her cons. The first con is that outside of lunar teams, her value is going to drop a little bit. I did say that she's still going to be playable in some teams that are not even like Not Cry teams, but in most teams like that, she's not going to be super valuable, especially alone. When you're playing her without any Not Cry characters and you're just slapping her as like a Hydra support, usually she's not going to be that valuable because her main value is just going to be buffing the lunar reactions. So when she's not able to do that, she's just going to be like a Hydro applier and sub DPS, and she can be easily replaced by many other characters. So her value outside of Not Cry teams is not going to be super huge, especially when she's alone. We're going to talk about that more in a little bit. The second con about her is that most of her teams are going to be a little expensive, and that's me just talking about her best teams or like her premium teams. Most of them are going to be literally like 3 or 4 5 stars. So if you're chasing her actual like max numbers that you always see people talking about that she's advertised to deal or at least to enable, then keep in mind most of these teams you're going to need at least 3 5 stars or 4 5 stars, which can be a little hard for some people, but her teams in general are definitely on the expensive side. The last con about her is that she has a little bit of a complex building kit. You simply just need a lot of stats. You need HP, crit damage, energy recharge, elemental mastery. All of these things are going to be a little hard for you to get enough of everything if you want to make her a full-rounded character, and that's not always good. I mean, it's very doable, but it's going to be a little expensive to farm for her and get the right weapons and stuff like that, which is something to just keep an eye out for. Yeah, that's pretty much it for Columbina. In general, I would say she's going to be pretty good. Definitely one of the best characters in the game that have ever been released. Now, moving on to Ineffa. Ineffa has been out for a while now, and she hasn't been a fan favorite back then. But right now, a lot of people are seeing her value. Her role is just going to be an electro sub DPS. She's also a shielder and also some sort of buffer because she can give you some elemental mastery, which is pretty good. She also enables lunar charge. For her pros, she has good sub DPS damage. Definitely one of the best sub DPSs in the game, especially in the teams where she's meant to deal sub DPS damage. She's definitely going to be pretty good. The second pro about her is that she has a shield that's super valuable, and you can play her as a sustain, so she can fill the sustain slot and also be a sub DPS and also a buffer at the same time, which is super valuable. The last pro about her is that she's gonna be super versatile in my opinion. You can just slap her in any electro charge team and she's probably gonna make them better. She's just gonna enable lunar charge, then buff it, and that's gonna be super valuable. But in general, even outside of these teams, you can just use her wherever you need like a shielder or electro sub DPS or electro applier, and she's gonna do pretty well, especially if you pair her with other Not Cry characters like Columbina, for example. example, she's gonna be super broken then. So for her versatility, she's probably one of the most versatile characters we've seen in a while, especially in the Notcry region. Super usable in a lot of teams. She can always just give you some electro damage, a shield, and that's gonna be super valuable. And also, even as a niche support, she's gonna be super good for characters like Flint, for example, with Columbina and stuff like that. Those are like her main teams. Obviously, she's gonna be top tier then, but she can always be a B or A tier character for very general teams. Now, moving on to her cons, I'd say the first con about her is that she's going to be a little hard to build. Basically, the exact same thing as Columbina. You'll need attack, elemental mastery, crit, some energy recharge. All of these are necessary for like lunar charge supports because you're going to be enabling lunar charge reactions that can crit and stuff like that. So you're going to need all of the crit options just as a normal DPS, but then also you're going to need the support options like the energy recharge, the elemental mastery, and stuff like that, which can be a little hard to combine. The last con about her, in my opinion, is that her shield is not really the best shield, especially if you're not building enough attack on her. Her shield is gonna lack a little bit. Now, it can definitely be enough as a sustain, especially if you know how to play, but in general, it's not like a shield where you can just use it and then forget about being hit. Her shield is not the strongest, to say the least. I think that's pretty much it with her cons, really. I don't really see many logical cons for her role, just her being an electro sub DPS, shielder, and also buffer. When you combine these at the same character, you cannot really ask for too much. Now, moving on to Zibai, she's just going to be a Geo main DPS basically. That's her main role. And she's also based around the new lunar crystallized reaction. And that's where most of her damage is going to be coming from. For her pros, she's going to have super high damage. And I mean like actual super high damage. For her best teams, she's probably going to be like the second best main DPS in this game right now. That's saying a lot. She's even a little better than Skirk in her like best teams, and obviously that's good. From a main DPS, this is all you need. She's also pretty easy to build as a character that scales with defense. Defense is just going to be much more available than attack as like a stat in general, and it also unlocks many more weapons. You can use 3-star weapons, you can use craftable weapons, and all of them are going to work fine because she doesn't scale with attack. You can have a lot of free to play options for her, and she's generally going to be pretty easy to build. For her pros, I think that's pretty much it, and for a main DPS that mainly just deals damage, that's all you need. You just want them to deal high amounts of damage, and you want them to be easy to build. You cannot ask for too much. For cons, if I had to pick some, I'd say she has kind of like restrictive teams. Usually you'd want to play her with at least one Geo and then one Hydro, and that already takes a lot from your teams. And even those Geos and Hydros are going to be a little specific. It's not any Geo or any Hydro. So usually if you want to play her in her best environment, her teams are not going to be super versatile. It's just like a lunar crystallized team, and that's it. You need that Hydro, you still need that Geo all the time. You probably need a Shielder all the time, and that's going to restrict your teams. But for a character with her caliber, honestly, I feel like it's logical. It's not a big con. The second con about her is that some gameplay issues potentially. Now, she's not out yet, obviously, so this is not fully confirmed. But from what I've been seeing, she does have some interruption issues, especially that she needs to reach R4. So without a Shielder, she might be a little hard to actually play like comfortably. I also heard she might have some tracking issues with enemies that are moving and stuff like that. So this might also be a thing. But in general, I'm seeing that she's gonna be a little uncomfortable to play. She's not the easiest character to play. Again, she's not even out yet, so we're gonna have to see and try her. Take this with a grain of salt. But in general, I wouldn't think Zibai is gonna be one of those characters that are gonna be like super easy, mindlessly played. So just keep that in mind. But honestly, again, for the damage she deals, those are very subtle cons, and I think she's a super good character. Now, for the final character on this banner, which is going to be Neuvillette, it's been out for a very long while now. It's a pretty good Hydro main DPS. Was probably the best main DPS like a long time ago. And it's also one of the longest life characters, especially main DPSs in my opinion. For his pros, obviously he's going to have decent damage. His damage is not going to be the best right now at all. He has definitely been power creeps a little bit. That's for sure in my opinion. Especially in his like typical hyper carry teams. I would say he's like an A tier main DPS right now instead of S tier. So it's definitely not as good as he used to be, at least relatively. The second part about her is that he's pretty easy to play, probably one of the most brainless characters that you can use. But yeah, you can just use him, you have your thingy, you spin, aim, and that's pretty much it. His kit sounds complicated with the whole like droplets you have to collect and stuff like that, but in practice, you don't really need to actually do anything. So it's definitely one of the easiest characters to play. For his cons, I would say C0 is kind of too limited, both in terms of teams and also in terms of resistance to interruption. So without C1, I think it's going to be a little uncomfortable to play for sure, and you probably should go for C1 if you're serious about maining him. I think it's probably one of the most important C1s in the game, honestly. Without it, you're going to be too limited and also a little uncomfortable to play without like a sustain or shielder. The second card that unfortunately, as I said before, has been a little power crept. He's definitely still usable, still like decent damage. He's also getting some slight upgrades here and there with like newer supports and stuff like that, but in general, he's definitely not the same tier as he used to be. Many characters just can out damage him pretty easily right now. So if you're after like the strongest main DPS or something like that, then he's probably not going to be the best option. But for a main DPS that's like 2 years old or more, honestly, he's doing pretty fine. There are some teams for him with like Columbina and Ineffa right now, or what you can call like a wheelchair team. And they are good teams, like they're top tier teams, but that's not a Neuvillette team really, in my opinion. That's just a Columbina Ineffa team. So I wouldn't really count that as like an upgrade, honestly. He's not really meant to be there. When I talk about his damage, I talk about teams where he's like the main hyper carry and you use supports to buff him. These teams are not the best right now for him, especially compared to newer DPSs. Alright, so now for the final conclusion, which characters should you get? So as I said, it's going to depend on what you want. First of all, if you need a main DPS, I would say Zibai is probably going to be your best option. He's going to be super strong right now, and as I said, probably the second strongest main DPS in the game right now, especially if you have some of her premium teammates, like Columbina for example, or Eluga, especially C6, which you probably could easily obtain if you're wishing for her, because he's going to be on her banner. Then honestly, I think she's going to be super good, and she's probably the main DPS you want to go for in general. She's just the newest DPS. The newest DPS is always going to be better. The newest DPS is always going to live for longer. So if you need the main DPS, we have two on this banner. We have Zibai and Neuvillette, and Zibai is probably the better option. Now you can always get Neuvillette. I'm not saying it's going to be bad. You can get him for comfort, you know, just like a main DPS. They can always plug in a lot of easy free-to-play teams, and it's going to deal decent damage, and you're probably going to be able to clear with him, but he's definitely not the best option. I would say go for Zibai. Even her free-to-play teams are probably going to be better. For Columbina, I mean, she's just a not-cry queen right now. So I would say if you're planning to use any not-cry characters in general, whether you already got them or you're planning to get any not-cry characters that just use Lunar Charge, then she's probably a good investment for your account. So if you have somebody like Flynn's, for example, Nefer, Lauma, Ineffa, any of these characters are going to be super valuable with Columbina, and she's going to be a pretty significant upgrade for most of them. All of the new lunar reactions need Hydro, so usually you'll need to play these characters with just a Hydro enabler, and having the luxury to have a Hydro enabler and also lunar reactions buffer at the same time is always going to make any lunar reactions teams just simply better. So if you're planning to tap in the Nutcry meta in general, I'd say Columbina is definitely a pretty valuable pick to go for. For Ineffa, I'd say you can get her, especially if you have Flynn's. She's always going to be his best support, and she's going to unlock a whole new level for him. So if you have Flynn's, then you should definitely get Ineffa out of this patch. No question, no Columbina, nothing like that. Just go for Ineffa. And even if you don't have Flynn's, she's also going to be a super good combo with Columbina. So if you're planning to get Columbina and you don't want Zibai and you want a second character, Ineffa can be a pretty good combo with Columbina. As I said, you can always use them as just like sort of a wheelchair base, and then you can add a huge variety of characters. And these two are just going to carry the team basically. So a lot of older main DPSs or sub DPSs in general are going to be revived, and you can play them in this comp with Columbina and Ineffa as just like drivers, and they're going to do pretty well as like general teams. If this type of teams interests you, then you can also go for Ineffa with Columbina, and it's going to be a pretty good base to a lot of teams. But in general, I'd recommend Ineffa with Flynn's. That's like her main use case. You can get her as extra if you have Columbina. If not, then she's probably a skip. For Neuvillette, as I said, if you like him or you just want an easy universal main DPS and you mainly just like him, you can go for him. But in general, for a main DPS, I think Zibai is probably the better option for right now. But yeah, that was the video, guys. If you enjoyed it, please have a like, subscribe to the channel. Tell me what you guys are getting in the comments. See you guys in the next video. Peace.